Hello, Tim Crosby here with my mandolin today. It's a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful day to talk about modes. Common question comes up, particularly in the fiddle tune world. What's this thing about modes? But it shows up everywhere. And so a brief discussion will ensue here about what are modes and how do you figure them out and what do you do with them. The easiest way to start is to say that modes, the word mode simply means a different scale. So the scale that we commonly call the major scale, do, re, mi, is a mode. In fact, modes have been given names. There was some musicologist years ago, hundreds of years ago, I don't know when, that decided that each ancient Greek city-state had its own scale that they played their music with and named these modes after them. So you have Ionian, and you have Dorian, and Phrygian, and Lydian, and Mixolydian, and Aeolian, and Locrian modes, 7 modes. This is important because each one of the modes corresponds to one of the notes in our regular, otherwise known as diatonic scale, our major scale. Let me start there. Well, let me take a little sidestep and say, on the website, on my website, timcrosbymusic.com, there is a free download called Simple Theory Chart. And if you go there and get yourself a copy of it, you will see across the bottom of that chart a little row that kind of describes the modes. And it's a helpful reference when you're talking about them. So what's a diatonic scale? Well, our scale that humans seem to really like consists of these intervals. There's a whole step between the first note and the second note. There's a whole step between the second note and the third note, a half step, and then 3 more whole steps, and then a half step to take you home. You know, it's do, a deer, a female deer. Here's a C scale. If you have a keyboard or piano handy, look at the white keys and they correspond to these things. So you've got C to D, that's a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F, half step, and then 3 more whole steps, and then a half step to finish it off. White keys on the piano, no black keys involved, and that's the major scale. It's also in mode speak called the Ionian mode. So here's how you figure it out. You're going to keep those intervals the same: whole step, half step, whole step, half step, the same way. But now, whichever way we go, we're going to shift where we start and end. So when we start on C and end on C, it's the major scale or Ionian mode. But now we're going to go up 1 note to the next note, D, and we're going to go D to D, but we're going to keep those same whole steps and half steps in the same place. So now we have a whole step and then a half step. And then we have 3 whole steps, and then a half step. We got 1 more note to go, and it's a whole step. And it makes a minor sounding scale. And it's called the Dorian mode. Third one is called the Phrygian mode. It starts on the 3rd note of that original major scale, E to E, and it's very closely related to the mode that's used in a lot of Middle Eastern music, a lot of gypsy music, and a lot of Eastern European music, klezmer music. They even have a mode called the Phrygish mode, the Phrygian mode. To our ear, it's our Western ear, it sort of sounds unfinished, but that's the Phrygian. Next one is the Lydian, starting on the F of the C scale, and goes F to F. It's not very useful in a lot of music. Well, jazz players use it some. The next one is a very useful one. It's called the Mixolydian. It starts on the 5th degree of that original C scale. We're going to start on a G, and it sounds very major, except for that whole step between 7 and 8. The next one is a minor sounding mode called the Aeolian mode. Goes from A to A. Good. Also in the classical world, they call that the natural minor scale. But in mode speak, in folk music, we call it the Aeolian mode. There's one more called the Locrian mode, which all of the theory books I remember reading, when they described the Locrian mode, they said this is a theoretical mode because it's not particularly useful in playing actual music, although pieces have been composed using the mode and they sound really strange. So we've got 7 modes, of which in most of our music, particularly in my world and kind of folk music and fiddle tunes, there are only 4 of them that are used at all. There's the major scale, the Ionian mode, regular do, re, mi. The Dorian mode, which is a minor mode, that's that one. The Mixolydian mode, which is another major sounding mode, except with that funny note at the end of it. And the Aeolian mode, which is the other minor mode. So, here's some examples. Oh, one more thing before we get into a couple of examples. What do you do with chord progressions as they relate to these modes? Very briefly, and I can go on and on about that in another place and another time, but just very briefly, the chord progression that usually goes along with the major mode, the Ionian mode, the major scale, is the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. Otherwise, functionally, they're called the tonic, the subdominant, and the dominant is the way they function. Particularly the dominant chord is the one that sets up the tension that has to resolve somewhere. It wants to take you back home. Now we're home. In the Dorian mode, because those intervals have shifted, the chords that you use are a little bit different, but not terribly so. You still have the chord based on the first note of the scale, which is a D minor now, in D Dorian. You have a 4 chord, a subdominant chord, which is a G, the 4th degree of that D scale. That's a G major chord. But then you have, for the dominant chord, a C major scale, which takes you back home to the home D minor. So if you have some fiddle tune that's in D minor, and you notice it has that C natural note and a C major chord, chances are you're in the Dorian mode. Mixolydian, classic example of Mixolydian is the fiddle tune Old Joe Clark when done in the key of G. So there you have a G major chord and an F major chord as your 2 chords in the chord progression. One more step up to the Aeolian mode, A minor. It also has what you might think of as otherwise a flat 7 chord for the dominant. It has a G major chord. And it has for its subdominant a D minor. So, some bits and pieces to summarize. Look at the white keys of your piano or play a major scale. Remember where those notes all are. Start from the 2nd note, you get the Dorian mode. Start from the third note, you get the Phrygian mode. Start from the fourth, you get the Lydian. Start from the fifth note, you get Mixolydian, one of my all-time favorites. Start from the sixth note, you get Aeolian. And then we'll just skip that seventh note because it's a theoretical mode only. So there you have a very quick overview of modes, but I hope it helps you understand that you're using that same scale and just changing where you start and end. I'm Tim Crosby. Thanks for being here.